Welcome to The Art of Growth. This is Jim Zartman, and it has been a minute. Sorry, we have not been as consistent with the podcast this year because we've been doing the work. We've been doing stuff out there with businesses, with individuals, but we've been holding back episodes because we wanted to put them out consistently for a while, and so we are back. We have a couple one-offs on important aspects of connection. We're going to do a 3-part series on the 3 stages of the most intimate connections and romance and love life and partnerships. And then we're going to do our next panel season where all the types are going to be talking about how they experience connection and what they look for. But it's good to be back. You can find out more about us at theartofgrowth.org. If you as an individual are looking for some support in your journey, or your organizational team could use that support and training on how to optimize as a team, you can reach out to us at theartofgrowth.org. But that's it. So here's Joel Hubbard and myself. Let's go.
So I was thinking about connection quite a bit as it relates to teams, romantic relationships, friendships, and
all the things of the theme this year.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what causes these relationships to perform well, to have longevity, and to have this exchange of connection where you do feel like you belong, where you feel like you're seen, you're heard, your contribution is welcomed. What I've just said there is probably what everybody's looking for in a relationship. It's like, am I seen? Am I heard? Am I valued? Does what I do and contribute to the relationship matter? Do the people actually like it? Am I allowed to be who I am more fully? Or do I have to constantly contract and pull back on who I am, edit myself in relationship with these people? And I think on any given day, we feel all of those things. Like, boy, I have to contract, I have to edit because I said something or I did something that didn't go well. And so all of that is happening. And yet these dynamics, I think, are really rich for our own personal growth and transformation if we, listen well to what's happening in that environment. But in other cases, I was talking to someone yesterday about this, like, someone was telling me they want to do a 360. They're the president of a company. They've never done a 360 review. They want to do one. And I asked this individual, can you hear the feedback? Or will it be too traumatic for you? How are you going to feel about that? And it's like, well, because I know this personality type, and they merge a little too easily. They kind of go along with what other people, and then they lose themselves.
Yeah.
And so there's parts of you cannot ever change because they're fundamental to who you are. And then there's other things that you do want to change because they're actually self-limiting behaviors that are not fully who you are at your best.
Yeah, and those 360s, sometimes they are helpful and reveal blind spots. And sometimes it's just like, well, this is something that's who you are, and it's not really going to really change. So yeah, you can get a mixed
You do.
thing.
And if you're not in a place where you are already fairly solid in your own sense of these are the characteristics or the sort of core personality.
Yeah. This isn't something I should change.
I should not change these.
It's a strength, right?
Yeah, you end up selling out.
And for those who aren't familiar with the 360, what that means is a lot of businesses do these because you're taking a 360 feedback about who you are and how you're leading. So people above you, and you're also getting feedback
from people on your level.
People below you, it's 360 degrees around you. Yeah. So it's not just like a top-down perspective of you, but all of those around you, which is, that's the idea.
Yeah. I've heard from certain types say, they want me to be more of a ladder climber. Like, that's what I'm getting from those above me. Like, really want to, and this person's like, my type doesn't do that. Like, generally speaking, I'm not seeking to just step on people, move ahead, get as far up as I can.
Yep.
I'm more of a team-oriented person. I prefer to do that. It's like, well, then you can't compromise that.
Yeah, we've heard from people who are like, well, they want me to take the next step up, but the next step up is managing people. And
which I don't like doing. Exactly.
I don't want to do that at all because I like being right here and doing this kind of
hands-on.
That's what I enjoy. Yeah,
totally. More one-to-one with people. I think that's really important to understand that about yourself, even as we're talking about connection, is you in connection have to know more and more who you are in relationship with other people. It's not outside a relationship with people. It's in relationship with people, but also recognizing what parts of you it can be let go of. Things that you've adapted, habits, that are just not really helpful to you ultimately and to relationships around you.
And we can put this on a framework that when we're going to go into explaining these stages of like long-term relationships, formed and sustained relationships, we're all looking for what we've talked about before, clarity on our identity and our community and our purpose. So we want to have a whole and rounded life. So we're trying to be clear on who we are and welcome that part of ourselves, which, we're addressing a little bit as people are trying to figure this out. And we also want to know like who we should be with and who we should be around. And we want to feel like we can do something that matters to us, that is meaningful. So all of these components are important to who we are as individuals. And then you put that in a communal context, and it's just like, well, what are these components of forming and sustaining those long-term relationships where we can identity, be ourselves, community, be with people who we have some commonality and mutual goals with, and purpose. We can be who we are and bring our unique gifts to the situation. And we've talked about this a lot before, this whole identity, community, purpose thing. And this is kind of like, okay, so let's put that in a context of, forming and sustaining these long-term relationships, teams, friendships, romance, whatever it is, putting it into that context as we've been on this theme of connection. So we wanted to structure it around some of that.
Yeah, and I think we begin with that first one, which is commonality. So this is the stage of, you're in line, and you're in this long line with a bunch of people, and there's this person at the register who is pulling out 25, 30 coupons and going through the process of that, and not at a fast pace, but rather slowly and fumbling around. And then they drop something, and then there's a price check. And pretty soon you start noticing people turning around, kind of catching glances of each other and seeing if there's other people that are feeling the same way as you are, right? And
is this bonding over the negative like we talked about a few months ago?
It's bonding over the negative, my friend. There's all sorts of ways to bond. No, seriously, it's funny how there are all sorts of ways, and people bond very well around the negative. It shows up everywhere. But there might be a little humor in it as well. Like you're looking around and you're starting to get frustrated. There's some chuckling going on. If someone's too dark, then the rest of the line is just like, I'm not going to go there with you.
But if you can lighten the context of the situation, like
because you're naming
like,
exactly because you're naming the problem everybody's feeling.
Yeah, everyone knows it,
right? So that's a shared experience, and that's what I mean by commonality. It's like there's a shared experience. Now with friendships and romantic partnerships and teams that you work on, the familiarity is really like a bonding experience around things that you've shared together.
Yeah.
And you know this if you haven't seen somebody in like a bunch of years. They live on the other coast or something, and you see each other after 5 or 6 years. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to catch up. But at some point, you're also going to maybe share some stories from the past of like, remember when that thing happened?
Yeah.
Right? When you do that, you know what happens when the other person goes, oh my gosh, yes, I remember that, and this happened. And there's an alignment that happens there, and it feels kind of nice. It's like a bonding experience there. When you and your partner, maybe you have shared interest in particular types of movies, right? You may be talking about that, like, oh, yeah, remember that movie we watched? And or the practice itself is like, because we like these things, we share them together. That's a way of bonding. And that familiarity is really important for us to feel safe in an environment. And I think that's the first thing you seek, particularly if you're, like, you think about when you get onto a new team at work. If if your team is the type of team that shifts around every couple of years, or maybe even less than that, people come, people go. But let's say you completely switch and go to a new team, and we've addressed that with some of the corporate stuff that we've been doing. And the thing that we're emphasizing with them is the first thing you want to do is not cast vision, because if you cast vision, you don't have the alignment, you don't have the bonding, you don't have that familiarity yet, and so you're going to cause more disruption. What you want to do is really align. Now, you can do the vision casting thing, but you're really looking to, let's see if we can align. That's the goal of that first, period of time, however long, first few weeks, first few months. We're trying to build that sense of safety by having this bonding, by having this familiarity, by having this common space in common practices. So, yeah.
Yeah, commonality is something we're all seeking at the beginning. And in a work environment, the project is often the thing that we have in common. And
Exactly.
we all bring something to the table, and that's great. I love the John O'Donohue quote when it comes to friendship. True friendship is not an act of the will or force, but is an act of recognition. So it's I see something in you that I connect with, that that we have something in common. And it could be, hey, we both love doing this kind of activity. You know, I've definitely bonded with people over the years over like surfing or over, training or just over the Enneagram, right? So we've talked to a lot of people. You have this bonding experience talking about that. So there's that commonality that we're seeking because we're all trying to feel safe, right? So we've talked about how so much of our mechanisms of our personality are an attempt to feel safe in the world and navigate the world. And so naturally, we want to find people that we feel safe with. That makes a lot of sense. But it's also, do we feel seen? So even if you don't totally get where I'm coming from or we're really different, if I still feel really seen by you and I can see you, there's a commonality that is established. Like some of my closest friendships, we make jokes about how, like, why are we friends? Because we have like nothing in common. But the commonality is the relational value, the relational connection, the fact that we can talk about something and bring very different things to it, and it's interesting. So a lot of times it's commonality due to similarity, and sometimes it's commonality due to a value or an interest or a project. It can come from a lot of different places, but still there's that coming together because I feel safe, I feel seen. There's a familiarity here, even if I can't quite name what that is. And this is one thing that we've talked to a lot of teams about, especially because they're coming together and they don't necessarily know each other. But this value of assuming positive intent. Because it's really hard to find commonality if you don't assume positive intent about the other person. That, hey, they want what's best for me. I want what's best for them. Together, we want what's best for our client, our health, our emotional growth, whatever it is. But there is that element that creates that aspect of safety.
Yeah. And every one of us, we're looking to have a sense where when we're sharing the space, these values, these interests together, that these are places where we can align and feel okay. We're not alone in the world. I think that's a big part of the bonding is I'm not alone. I'm not alone. So that's the reason why, too, you'll hear bonding around the negative bias of our brains will go to negative topics and people align around that. Well, why? Well, because again, I'm not alone in the world. I think there's a lot of crazy things going on right now. Am I alone in my thinking? No, I don't know. So when I talk to you, particularly this works pretty profoundly when it's with a stranger you've never met before and you have a conversation and you find, oh, they're seeing things similar to me. So I'm not crazy and they don't feel crazy. And now there's this like point of connection. But I'm also aware that like there are personality types I think that do really well or better, I think perhaps at the bonding and at that commonality space. And others that struggle a little bit with it. And I think that is where you can tune into yourself and ask yourself, which one would I be most comfortable in naturally? For me, it's never been that stage of commonality and bonding. It's always been the stage of, which we'll talk about in a moment, the one that has to do with more what's, in the ways that we actually differ. And it's not that I don't seek it out. I do seek out that like commonality and ways we align and all that. I love that. But it's also the place where I get uncomfortable if we stay too long there. And so I might rush through that space. And for me, it feels like I'm getting swallowed up by that space. It's like, oh no, now I've lost my own sense of identity in this space. And so I pull back to reestablish my own sense of identity.
Yeah, because we need both, right?
Yeah,
so we need commonality and we need difference. We were talking a couple weeks ago at our meeting and you mentioned something about we need commonality and difference for procreation. So anything that is going to make a new life requires both.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
The commonality, but it also requires like the difference.
Yes.
In order to generate something that is positive and new in the world.
Yeah.
And so, yes, that's why you look at that. Because it's funny, I actually have a hard time bonding over the negative. I was just out looking for sea glass, and this woman came up and we were talking to me for just a second. And then she started going off on these negative things, and I agreed with her, but I was like, I can't connect on this. To me, I feel like if we connect initially on something negative, I think you're going to like say something negative about me later.
Oh, I see. So there's like different. Okay, yeah.
But it's like I've still done it for sure, and especially if it's done in good humor or something like that. But like overly negative, I have a hard time bonding over something that is like a shared goal or a shared interest or a shared something like that. Because then it feels like, oh, well, we can play, which is a huge element of commonality bonding. Yeah. Is this the bonding around we can play, whether we're playing with this idea, we're playing with this concept, we're playing with this activity. There's something in us that it harkens into that. Why is this my best friend? Because they live down the street as I'm a kid. Yeah. Right. There's a childlike aspect of bonding over play. And even if adults want to, play with something that's a lot more sophisticated, there's an element that I think ties into that.
Yeah. And so there's this stage of sort of establishing that commonality has a part of it that's beautiful. We're sort of talking in general. There's a part of it that's really beautiful. Yeah. There's a part of it that is also shallow. And I want to address that shallow part of it, which is our commonality is built around maybe something negative. Our commonality is built around the fact that we share the same office space. Our commonality is built around the fact that we share the same political persuasion or religious persuasion.
Something external.
Yeah. And something that doesn't go any further than that. It's sort of like that's the touch point.
Yeah.
And so if we don't have that in common, we have nowhere to go relationally.
Right.
And in some of these circles too, because you can keep trying to seek that commonality and seek that sense of safety through commonality, is you can have these shared beliefs that you hold, these shared practices that you hold, that even if you start to feel differently about something, because the circle you're in, they seem to agree, they seem to share these commonalities, is you might feel like, I can't voice my view. I can't differ. I can't suggest something, because if I do, then I might be the one who loses this bond, this connection. And so at that point, you start violating your own authenticity, your own values, your own changing and evolving self. And I think that that's the danger to that space, is it can keep you at a particular stage. And we've run into this with people that have said, I started to grow and my circle didn't know what to do with me. And I began to be accused of all sorts of things. And the decision at that point is, do I just give up on that to maintain this commonality that I have with this group? Or do I let go of that group in order to grow?
Yeah. It feels like a lose-lose. I'm either going to lose some of the connections that I have, or I'm going to have to exile and disconnect from part of myself, which both of them feel awful at that point. And then even if you try to stay, though, there's something about the intimacy is now capped, because I'm constantly going to be shutting certain things off. Yeah. Or causing a disruption.
Yeah. There's a new depth to me now that I've discovered, and I'd like to share that, but I can't because...
Yep, it's not welcome here. Yep. Or just a difference. We've talked about how there's certain relationships that at one point were really, really close, but over time, if they've gone too far down a particular political spectrum or whatever on either side, I'm at a loss because I can't say I'm thinking this now, or, well, here's this nuance, because all of a sudden I can't bring nuance into this because it feels like a threat to you. And so there is difference. Yeah, but this is the whole thing we're going into is like difference is also necessary.
Yeah. I mean, it happens on teams. Think about like,
Yeah.
the teams that we've worked with where it's like, well, I didn't actually think that was a good idea. Well, did you speak up? Did you say, no, I didn't want to say anything? It's like, well, why? Because it's not going to get received well. It's going to get, there's all sorts of things that we're not saying, even in teams, because we're trying to keep our job, keep that commonality with each other. I don't want to be the voice of dissent. So I'm going to stay silent. I have a question, but I don't dare to ask that question because it might seem like I'm not on board, or there's all sorts of things that come up like that. Or conversely, where it's like, I'm afraid of saying something because I'm going to get some negative pushback. So I'm not going to say anything because they are the voices of dissent around me. And so I'm not going to lean in too much. I'm just going to kind of hold back. And we all lose as a result of that. Like safe spaces to where you can actually do the difficult work. Mm-hmm. Which is what brings us to that next stage, I think, of relationship is the point of bonding, the point of that connection is both something that is nurturing for us and really healthy, but it's also so that we can go to that next stage of now we can do some hard work of seeing where we don't align, where we are different. I think that's where the deepening of the bonding can take place. Otherwise, you're constantly bonding over the same stupid things that you've always bonded on. They're not stupid, but you've bonded around the same things. And at some point, it's like we've gone around this bush 1,000 times. Is there anything more to us as a people than these sets of,
but there are
commonalities?
Ways that people bond over the preservation aspect of an idea or over value of something instead of the exploration of it.
Yeah.
We just tend to be two people, and I just want to acknowledge the bias that we value evolution and progression more than preservation.
For sure.
And so there is that element there. But when we're talking about companies and teams, we've done this in teams. For teams to succeed, preservation is deadly. I always think of that example of the person who walked in with the iPhone at BlackBerry and held it up and he said, "What are we going to do about it?" And they all said, the people at the table said, "Well, that's not really what we do. That's not for us to be worried about." And, they were mostly gone a few years later. And we've said this in teams that progress depends on difference and conflict. And those elements are required for growth, for progress, for leaning into a new and possible future. So if you want to have a future that you imagine as possible, disruption, conflict will be an element of that.
Yes.
And is required.
Yes. And you're right. We are biased towards that. If we had somebody who's more of, the kind of preserving, bonding, kind of person, they would help us see our own blind spots in that space as well. And I think it's fair enough. Yeah. So when we talk about the next stage, which is the stage of contrast. So we've gone from commonality, what we share in common, to now what is different about us. This is where the threat comes in, right? That you've got into that old stage thing with teams. It's like you form, you storm, you norm, and then you perform. Yeah. So that it's remarkably been like sustained because of how good it is. It's very, very true that we all experience this of the forming, which is that bonding, that commonality. And then you have, we have a problem. We have some differences, some contrasts. Usually that's where teams stop performing. That's where relationships run into a problem. And you really have a couple options on the extremes. One option is we return to the bonding because we don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
So we give up on the enterprise of that which is different. We just sort of say, well, let's just be okay that we've got these differences. Let's just move back to what makes us what's familiar, what's comfortable, what's common. And the other one is you push through, and people do push through, and then it's like pushing through in the sense of like, we are so different, we need to just move apart and separate and not work together, not partner up together, not be friends. So I do think that there's a lot of those. That tends to be the extremes of either we are an agreeable sort of group and we just hide the disagreements, or we're the disagreeable bunch that's always separating and finding another group and seeing if they'll agree with our disagreements and create a bond around that.
Yeah, and I actually worry that societal progress is going to be stunted by a move toward that recently, where there seems to be more of that happening now than I remember seeing, years past, where it is more normal that we're going to pull apart in the face of disagreement, or we're going to just be cozy and not have those elements. But if we're talking about sustaining relationships over time, you can't stay silent on those things forever. And if you want it over time, over a long period of time, like I've been so many different people throughout my life, and the people who have been with me, like they've co-created, like we've talked about this before, co-created this person. We've formed each other. When we talk about the forming stage, yes, you come together, but you're also impact each other in this contrast phase where we have to accept differences. But a huge component that you talk about a lot, and I think it's really valuable, which is in this stage, the tolerance for discomfort.
Yes. That is something that is a discipline we have to learn to do, is tolerating discomfort and difference.
Yeah.
Because that's at very least the starting point, I think, for everyone. It's like, I see difference. I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable means bad. So run away. Right? Like either convert them to my view, convert them to my side, or
convert or control.
Control, run away from that situation. Yeah. So it's funny how we import these sort of values, moral beliefs around difference. It's like, okay, they're different. Their view is different. Remember, it's funny, we've said this many times, like when we first run into personality difference, it's surprising to us because for us, as long as we could remember, we were the center of what's normal.
Yeah.
And everybody else is somewhat of an aberration of that.
Yeah.
No, in some cases, some people are the version of us at a better level, and we're like impressed. It's like, wow, that's that's something I aspire to. Because of that, it's like, what is wrong with you that you're not like me? Or my gosh, what's wrong with me that I'm not like you? Because you're really an exemplar of who I'd like to be.
Yeah, but lower versions of ourselves are absolutely horrible.
Oh, horrible.
Because even a really evolved version of something else, I can aspire to something about it. It's like really great.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I used to really have a low tolerance for sevens like myself, who I deemed as less, evolved or less, less
or you
healthy than me.
It. You see them doing
it reflected
the thing
stuff
that you used to do.
Oh, yeah.
The thing that you've learned to stop doing, and then you watch them do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And they can't hear it. Like it's pretty off-putting.
Oh, it is. Yeah. It is, yeah.
There's a contrast there. So it's even people who are similar to you. But we always hit this point of contrast. And I think it's incredibly important to build up our tolerance over time for the discomfort of someone who's radically different than us.
Yeah, just to name it as like, this is uncomfortable rather than this is bad. It's like, this just is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Use the right words. I'm a big believer in that because if you use
the story you
the
tell
wrong
yourself,
words, you can actually make things worse for yourself and and for the relationship.
Because the words you use are telling a story about what needs to happen. So if you say bad, the response needs to be distance, convert, convince, get away from. It has enemy words to it when you use the words bad. But when you just say it's different, it's uncomfortable, I don't know how I feel about this, like this is how it makes me feel, this is the impact it's having on me, that language creates a different story about where this is going. Yeah. And so yes, the words are incredibly important.
Yeah. And I think this, because there's honesty to that, there's truth to that, it's also more acceptable. Like people can handle that better when we're like, oh no, I'm just very uncomfortable right now. It's like, okay, got it. We can all relate to that, as opposed to a judgment statement of this is bad. You learn to tolerate, okay, this is where I begin. This is different. This is uncomfortable. Can I make space for that, which is different, until I can understand it more, until I have a better sense of it.
Yeah.
I think in part that's what's conveyed in the the Jewish creation narrative, where these mythical figures are said to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's like that drive to wanting that level of control, to be able to name that which we think is good or bad, is just a drive within all of us. And to like acknowledge we don't do well with difference. We do much better with those black and white categories, those polarities of this is good, this is bad. I know what good is, I know what bad is. Rather than like, can I stay a little bit longer in the space of love, in the space of openness, and be changed in the process? Like, I don't want to be changed. I want to be in control of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
I don't want to be changed by that. I want to be able to name it, and therefore it gives me a sense of safety and control over my world.
And there's two trees in the center of that garden, but the other tree in the center of that garden is the tree of life, which is to quote unquote, love as God loves. So where I welcome the difference, I welcome you are part of me, not other than. And it's the othering of others and the distance that is a thing of judgment instead of I am including you. A true act of love is inclusion during discomfort.
Yeah, and that's not to say that there isn't a point at which the judgment comes in. The judgment has to come in, but it doesn't precede the acceptance. It doesn't precede the love. It doesn't precede any of these things. It comes after. It comes quite a bit after.
Yeah.
Because if it precedes it, it's because of the ego's need to self-protect. Right. And we're not honest about that with ourselves. We want to hide behind that.
Right.
But in truth, that's what ultimately ends up making us feel naked and ashamed, is because we don't want to be exposed, which is really the remarkable thing about it, is the moment you begin to judge others, that same tool with which you judge ends up turning on yourself, and then you get exposed. But in sort of that space of like, let's first start with the full acceptance of the other person. It's not acquiescence. It's not that we don't have to change. There aren't really important things to discuss that are very different, that are problematic. Not at all.
Right.
But you can't see clearly. That's the problem with eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You don't see clearly when you don't see through the lens of love and through the lens of working through that discomfort first to then expand the capacity to love.
And there's something about when you feel that discomfort, one of the first things you have to do is remind yourself that you are safe, that this is not a threat to you and who you are and to your identity.
Yeah.
Because that's where we can go. It's the protective thing, which means we have to hold to our sense of righteousness. I am right about this.
Yeah.
And when you believe your cause is righteous, you don't have to ask whether or not your response is right.
Yeah.
Because then it's under judgment. And this idea of judgment, I was typing a couple ones around this and having this discussion where they were really having the struggle with this word, because in our culture, judgment, I think, has taken on this form of othering.
Yeah.
It's not a judgment call of saying, I believe this way.
This is the better way. This is the better path. Yeah.
A better path.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I believe to do the work on yourself of self-awareness, to develop those skill sets, we are making a judgment call by saying that embracing difference is better than rejecting it for commonality and similarity. And we're saying it's better to move forward. So we are making a judgment call about that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean anyone who's not doing that, I'm going to other you, and I'm going to say that you are on the outside of me now, because all of it I now see as part of me, because it's the honest truth is all of that is.
Yeah. There has to be a comfort with difference, because otherwise you move towards a kind of narcissism, which is like everything has to look like me or a version of me.
Oh, man.
And I'm the center of that. This is back to like, I'm in charge of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
It's like, you are not in charge of that.
Yeah.
You're not the one shining the light on everybody else.
Right.
You're the one walking into the light just like everybody else is, and realizing, oh my gosh, There's all kinds of stuff internally. and some of it is like I'm not exactly entirely comfortable with. And you have to be okay with that part of you, because that's a part of you that you can also other and choose to try to exile outside of yourself. You are a complex human being. There are others within you.
Yeah.
There are parts of you that you don't like. And so what do you do with those parts? Do you other those? Because that's how you're also going to treat other people who are different than you. I've had this conversation, particularly in the religious world. It's like stunning to me that when we think about the divine, whatever that is, when we think about the divine, we often think of it in terms of that which is familiar to us, rather than that which is utterly different from us. So what do you do with that which is different from you? That which is transcendent. Here's another term, transcendent. Something that's beyond, right? It's good to have something beyond because it compels us forward, right? They're the idealistic types, the 1-4-7 triad. The idealism drives all three of us types to imagine something could be different, something could be better. There has to be something better than this. And that is what compels us to move forward. That's the transcendent factor that functions within those types. It is our discomfort with that allows us to then be able to grow and transcend where we are. Yeah. Otherwise, you don't. You never grow beyond your own circle of what you believe to be, normal, right?
No, because then you form a religion, which is the old adage of God makes man in his image and man returns the favor.
The favor. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because then this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
Instead of having it, the other be something that is like compelling. Are we getting way too nerdy right now? I just was like, oh,
I think
crap.
about it, but I bring it all the way back to my relationship with my wife. And I think about how many times we run into that point of difference.
Yeah.
And I grow, she grows. We just change. That's the one constant in all relationships, in all forms of relationship, whether they're romantic, they're familial, they're work-related, friendships. You will change, they will change.
Yep.
That is a guarantee. What do you do when that happens? Again, we can go back to we want a bond, we don't like this, or we just need to break up and go separate ways because we've grown past each other or different from each other. Again, I'm not judging those things, but I think that there's a third option. And the third option is, what if that growth, that difference that we have within each other just compels us to say, I need to grow. I need to have a bigger capacity to love the other person. My own heart needs to expand.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the refrain that keeps coming back to me, which I do believe is from the transcendent. I do believe is from the divine, is every time I come to the point of, I don't know how to move forward in my relationship with my wife. We hit an impasse. The refrain I keep hearing internally, deep within my soul, is your love has to go deeper. And I don't like that answer, ever. Every time I hear that answer, it's like, I don't want that. I want you to somehow side with me. I want you to see my viewpoint. Because to me, it's so clear that this is a problem with her, not with me. And that's what it comes back to, is your love has to go deeper. Yeah. And when it does, remarkably, then the knowledge of good and evil and the sense of the broad sense of that is like, oh my gosh, now I see. There's a significant part of my ego that was acting up here and I didn't even see that. And my tolerance deepens. Yeah. And so I think that is the difference is so critical for everything, including for teams to really succeed at the highest levels, is can you welcome the difference that's present on the team? We have I remember heart types being in my circle sometimes. Now I can reflect back and I know that they were heart types. And I would get annoyed because I would hear things like, well, Joel, did you think about these people and bringing this
how
vision?
They're going to feel about it,
how they're
going to
feel
react
about it. And we should message it. And I just listen to that and go, oh my gosh, that just feels like such a distraction, so much noise. No, let's just do this thing that will get us to that destination. And now I look back and I think, I sure changed the team. And because I kept ignoring that, when that would have been so much more compelling and allowed this vision to expand beyond me and be a collectively held vision of how we could be better and the good that we could actually do in the world. And so I think that that's part of the gift of difference, is that it can actually move you to innovate, to create things that haven't been created yet, to make a far better environment, far better world. But that's what it requires, is that comfort with increasingly becoming comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah. And sometimes to hold the unresolvable. This is a haunting question for me lately as an action-oriented person who wants to figure things out, is what do I do with the thing I can do nothing about?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a question I keep dealing with, I keep playing with. What do I do with the things I can do nothing about? And I think there is an increased tolerance, but it's not just for the difference, but it's for the unresolvable. And making peace with the unresolvable in taking the long view, because we're talking about not just forming, but sustaining in relationships. And I think in the long view, I just go, okay, that's unresolvable. And I don't know if time will change it, if it'll be different a year from now, if I'll be different 3 years from now, if this will all change 5 years from now. I don't know. But I'm okay with that.
Well, and I think you've demonstrated this in your relationships where you can go back to which I think is a helpful thing to think about, is you go from the commonality to now the contrast. But you also can go back to the commonality when you don't know what to do with the contrast.
Yeah.
As you go, okay, we're not ignoring it. We're just recognizing we don't know what to do now because we're at a difference. We don't have to resolve it today. So, hey, let's go take a walk on the beach.
Yeah.
Let's go surfing together. You'll invite people to things like that. And like, hey, there's a great restaurant over here. I've been dying to check out. You want to come with? It's like, that's the sort of thing that says, okay, let's go back to what we have together. Right? It's not like, oh, because of this contrast, now we have nothing.
Now it's separate.
I've said this before. This is where the word disconnection is improperly used. I think it's not disconnection. I think it's disorientation. I think that's what's happened.
Good.
Your relationship just went into something where it's like, oh my gosh, we've changed. We're different. The team you're working on is like, we're not in sync anymore. What's going on here? It's like, yeah, you've just hit a bump in the road.
Right.
You've been disoriented. You've spilt your coffee. You dropped your sandwich. The car hit a massive, pothole or something. That's what happened. It doesn't mean that now everything is gone. And yet there are many times we can feel that way in that moment, like, oh my gosh, everything's lost. What do we have? It's like, no, you still have all of these shared experiences. You still have all of these wonderful things that you can come back to as a point of returning to the commonality. So you can return to that. At that point, that's where you can go to, okay, can we just sort of like normalize this, just like be okay with it. Like we chill, like we're not overdoing it now. We're not like, sometimes there's too much try and too much effort at trying to fix something when we don't even know what the actual issue. We know that there's something, we're not in sync, we're not lined up, but we might be over revving on trying to fix it.
Yeah. So we've been talking about commonality as that first part and this contrast and accepting difference as the second part. And you're kind of leading into it. But I like this idea that you can always return to the commonality and then you can like return to the common ground and then come back to the contrast. So you can kind of move back and forth between commonality and contrast. But then you brought in this third one, which we're calling chill. So sometimes it's just chill, take space.
It's a technical term.
Take a break, rest. Yeah, this is our technical term. Commonality, contrast, and chill.
Chill.
I mean, growing up in the 90s, like the take a chill pill thing, I can't get away from it. But it's so funny. It took us like an extra 30 minutes to start this podcast because we were trying to think of the right words like, to use. We're like, what is this third word?
Congenial.
I was like, I have a list. I don't know where it went. I put it's like using
how many C words we
could use. Because we wanted to have the consistent C word thing, right? So
I think you said contemplative. You went down that path.
Chill and calm and cool. But here's the thing. Because we have been seeing this pattern, which is people don't just stop. It's if I'm not working on it, if I'm not working on the relationship, if I'm not trying to solve it, if I'm not trying to figure it out, if I'm not actively doing something, if I'm not looking for even things to fix or to change, then I feel like something's wrong. But this is like the person who's going to the gym like 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. They never take a break.
Yep.
No breaks, no rest, and the body starts breaking down. No relationship can survive constant attention and constant effort and constant work, not your relationship with yourself, or that's when we actually become a little bit too self-obsessed, navel-gazing, certain aspects that are slightly narcissistic, because we're too much in it. And our relationships can suffer the same fate. Like sometimes you need to communicate like, I'll be back, but you need to return to yourself. You need to go do something else. You need to stop working on it.
Yeah.
Chill.
Give it a break. Like you can overwork anything. You can overwork a field. Like I remember planting tomatoes in my garden.
Yeah.
And then I didn't, typical person who lacks in the whole planting area. I was just like, oh, we'll grow tomatoes next year again. Didn't grow quite as well. By the third year, there were no tomatoes at all. I was like, what happened? It's like, well, it's supposed to rotate some things here. I guess you're supposed to do that. It's absolutely right. You can overdo anything. There's a reason for the seasons, right? Like you have, you have your summer, fall, winter, and in the winter things rest. And there's something really magical that happens in nature, in the ground, through rest. Same thing with our brains. Many, many geniuses, including Einstein himself, is like, well, let me go play the violin and go play the violin. And oftentimes in that rest period, it would be like, oh, there it clicks. Now, how come it clicked? It's not the focus of attention didn't get there. It was the attention not being focused that actually got there.
I'm laughing because like how many times have I sat in my office or like sat at my computer to write something like a newsletter or something, and I can't come up with anything, and I feel like I'm working because I'm sitting there in front of the computer.
Yeah.
But if I just go take a walk in the woods or something like that, and I'm taking a break, but then all of a sudden I'm like dictating the entire thing into my phone, and I have it written, and I have the idea, or I have a whole structure. I've written whole classes that way, and it's like I think I'm working on it because I'm sitting there.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the metaphor for sometimes what we can do to a relationship. So it's like we're sitting, staring at the blank page, but we're in our office and we're on our laptop, and so something's got to come because we're working on it.
Right now.
But nothing is happening. And in fact, I'm getting more frustrated. I'm getting burned out. And now I want to go check Instagram and Facebook and look up that guitar pedal. That sounds fun. And it's like not working. But if I just chill.
Yeah.
Just stop. Go walk. And like 10 minutes later, it's pouring out. Yeah. Because all of that, you've put yourself in a different environment, different state of mind. Everything's different.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden I'm like the creativity is flowing.
Yeah. It's the grasping at things that doesn't allow for that. It's like
exhausting.
Again, I've overquoted this, but Ian McGilchrist's book, The Master and His Emissary, the left side grasps where the right side doesn't. It's like a more release and more open-handed, which is why it is more of that creative side that intimates, that perceives, that sees, that feels and intuits things. And that's where a lot of the innovation and new ideas emerge from. But yeah, it's that hyper focus of attention. Like we have to solve it, we have to fix it. It's that grasping of something that can't be really grasped. So water can't be grasped. It's that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's surprising to say this, and some people come to us and because we're coaches, and they'll say, "Hey, I want to work on myself."
I've told people no.
I've literally said that to I've got a couple. I've recently said that to like.
Terrible for business, but great for them.
I had one, I remember that was 5 years ago, when I was early on in coaching, had been to, I don't know how many years of therapy, was about to go on this inner transformational work thing for like some retreat that was going to be a month long. Everybody in her circle had told her she needed this. She was, broken. She had all kinds of issues. She signs up with me and thinking like we're going to have multiple sessions. And in the first session, I say to her, you're a type 2, and this is how type 2s are. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You're very much like a lot of other type 2s. So let's stop thinking about all the things that are broken and wrong with you, and let's start thinking about all the things that are wonderful. how you are just
that's
beautifully
awesome.
designed.
Love it.
Let's explore that. Let's have some fun with that. See what you're made to do in this world. Like you love serving other people. That's something that means so much to you. Let's celebrate
So
that.
good.
After the first session, she was crying. She was laughing. She emails me, says,
Ease.
everything has broken open in me. I am so
Yes.
done with this whole thing. No longer seeing my therapist, no longer going to be doing that. And like absolutely celebrating and thrilled and excited to move forward. Now, it doesn't mean everything was fixed for her. It just means that you're now working from a space of not overdoing this whole thing of there's something wrong with me. I have to fix it. There's something
Yeah.
wrong with my partner. I have to fix her or fix him. There's something wrong with these people in my team that I work with. I've got to solve that problem. I got to always checking in, overdoing this whole thing of managing and fixing and solving the relationship dynamic. I shared this. I told you this, that one of the recent lessons I've learned, I've been practicing this now for some months, is when my wife and I get into a disagreement, is I would be bothered by that. And then it would color the future interactions for at least a period of time. And I thought, what if I don't try to change my own thoughts about the what just happened? So I'm trying to solve the puzzle as a head type.
Right.
What if I don't try to fix the emotional distress that we just experienced? What if instead I act like
It's okay.
we're okay?
Yeah.
Like we got to do. Who cares about it? We'll figure that out in time. But I love her and she loves me.
That's
So-
the higher reality.
So exactly, that's the more true.
Yes. More true
More
than the
true
way you feel at this
of the
moment.
than the way I feel in the moment.
Yes.
And so I started doing that. Lo and behold, a lot of these issues, didn't get addressed, but they didn't
They
need
don't
to.
feel as big.
They didn't feel as big. It's like, that was a stupid thing. Yeah, I shouldn't. Yeah, okay, I got it. Now move on. Like
Resting right sizes the problem.
that's a good way of putting it. Yes, because you don't know whether it's a molehill or a mountain. Not in the moment.
No, because it's all consuming.
Yeah.
So the sheer size of it feels not only large, but permanent.
Oh, it feels like
messes
if I don't
with
deal with
time.
this now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It messes with time. And I think time is one of the things that we have to respect when it comes to chill, and the seasons and the space.
Yeah.
Yes. And right size it.
Yeah.
It's not all consuming. It's not your whole life. It's not your whole world. And it's not forever.
Yeah. So I think going back to an earlier point you made is like, so you really emphasize that part that's like, okay, so you go from the commonality, you get to the contrast. That's where the bumpy roads are. And then you can return to, let's go back to the commonality. It's okay. We're okay. We're good. Let's go back to that because we don't know what to do with that problem.
Yeah.
And giving it that rest of like, we're going to rest on this problem. We know what the problem is. We've articulated it. We're not sweeping it under the rug because that's the other extreme. It's like we don't do anything about any of these problems because we want this agreeable kind of environment. No, you got to be truthful. You got to be honest with yourself. But if you know that after you've been honest and truthful and you've hit some of these bumpy spaces, you can return to the commonality.
Yeah.
I think it gives your mind, your heart a sense of like, we're okay. Your mind a sense of like, it doesn't have to focus so much on this. And then your body, like the action step you take, you go back to commonality. That's the action step you take. Don't try to solve this. Go back to commonality.
Yeah.
Celebrate what you have together. And then it does give the mind a break so that then there's the new ahas that emerge from that, the new sort of insights on how to move forward.
Yeah. Then you can go back into the contrast and it doesn't feel as big and it feels like something you can work out.
Yeah.
I've had the guy who built my guitar I play a lot, he would talk about getting really frustrated, working all day on one thing, and then eventually go, you know what, I'm just going to go to bed. I'll wake up the next morning and all of a sudden the solution will have appeared. You chilled, you relaxed, you know you're going to come back to it.
Right.
I'll be back is an incredibly important phrase, not just for Arnold, but for all of us. I'll be back. I'm going to return, but I just need to take some space and then we'll come back.
We could talk about grit and we can do that on a different time, but that totally made me think of like
the myth of grit.
The myth of grit. Like you could just keep plowing, just keep at it. Don't stop.
Yeah. Hustle. Keep the hustle, man.
Right. Yeah,
keep
yeah.
Grit.
Yeah. Which actually grit can be If it's defined as take breaks and come back to it, okay,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep.
But the sort of plowing ahead
The
nonstop,
grind.
it's like, no, the
No.
grind isn't going to get you there.
The grind is not going to get you there. And I think we deeply know that. And as you were saying, there was a Mary Oliver thing that came to mind that when we're talking about this is, we're always going to come back to the conflict or the contrast and deal with those differences, but we've got the commonality. And sometimes we need that calm, that chill. And I wanted to read this because it sparked it, where it's called Wild Geese. And she says, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscape, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clear blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. I think that's beautiful. It's like, and there's something about even reading that, and when I've heard it read,
puts me at ease. Yeah.
Yeah, you just go, okay,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Something internally knows
Yeah.
that's true.
That's right. That's right. There's an ease about what you just read. I feel it. I feel it inside me. It takes it from the relationship being this other thing. Versus this other thing, this other category. And it puts us more into that beautiful, harmonic, reciprocal, non-dual kind of space that I inhabit, you inhabit, we inhabit. We're together. And there's an ease to that.
So thanks for listening. If you don't know your Enneagram type or your Enneagram instinctual stack, you can take those free tests at our website, theartofgrowth.org. Check out our Instagram at justartofgrowth. And if you are signed up for our newsletter at our website, you'll be hearing from us when we feel like we have something good to share. We're not constantly pumping stuff out because sometimes we just need to sit back and learn a lot more, which is a bit of the season we've been in, as well as doing the work. So that's it for this week. Have an amazing week. And as always, grace and growth, my friends.